You've been taught to play fair. But the world doesn't reward fairness, it rewards leverage. This is not a lesson in kindness. It's a method for control, quiet, cold, absolute. In this message, you'll uncover the mindset of total domination, emotional detachment, decisive action, strategic silence. While others beg for approval, you'll be building influence. The art is not to be feared, it's to be respected beyond question. And that begins when you stop playing by their rules. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Listen carefully. The moment you need something from someone, you've already lost. The moment you care too deeply about their opinion, their approval, their reaction, you've handed them your power. Domination begins where attachment ends. I am Niccolò Machiavelli. I've studied princes and peasants, conquerors and the conquered. I've watched empires rise and fall based on one simple truth. Those who control themselves control everything else. Those who cannot control themselves control nothing. You want to dominate your field, your relationships, your life. Start here. Detach yourself from the outcome. Detach yourself from their reactions. Detach yourself from the need to be liked, understood, or approved of. The weak man pleads. The strong man decides. The weak man explains himself into irrelevance. The strong man acts and lets the world catch up. Which are you? Here's what most people don't understand about power. They think it's about force. They think it's about aggression. They think it's about making noise. No. Power is about distance, mental distance, emotional distance, strategic distance. When you're attached to an outcome, you become predictable. When you're predictable, you become controllable. When you're controllable, you've lost before you've even begun. Watch a master negotiator. Watch a true leader. Watch someone who commands respect without demanding it. They operate from a place of complete detachment. They care about the result, but they don't need it. They want success, but they don't depend on it. They desire influence, but they don't chase it. This detachment creates something extraordinary. It creates leverage. When you don't need their yes, your no becomes powerful. When you don't need their approval, your standards become absolute. When you don't need their participation, your invitation becomes valuable. But let me ask you this: how? Many times have you compromised your position because you were too attached to being accepted? How many times have you weakened your argument because you needed them to like you? How many times have you given away your power because you couldn't bear the thought of walking away? The prince who needs his subjects' love is weak. The prince who commands their respect is strong. The prince who operates beyond their emotional manipulation is untouchable. Detachment is not indifference. Don't confuse the two. Indifference is weakness disguised as strength. Detachment is strength disguised as calm. The indifferent man doesn't care about anything. The detached man cares about everything, but depends on nothing. You must learn to hold your goals lightly and your principles tightly. Hold your desires lightly and your discipline tightly. Hold your relationships lightly and your respect tightly. When others see that you don't need them, they begin to need you. When others see that you don't chase them, they begin to chase you. When others see that you don't break under pressure, they begin to respect your presence. This is the foundation of all domination. Not the ability to force others to submit, but the ability to make submission feel natural. Not the power to demand respect, but the presence that commands it automatically. Your attachment is your weakness. Your desperation is your downfall. Your need is your negotiation point, and everyone can see it. The man who needs nothing from you has everything to offer. The man who depends on nothing from you has everything to give. The man who requires nothing from you becomes someone you cannot ignore. Begin here, today, this moment. Identify what you're too attached to: your image, your reputation, your comfort, your security. Whatever you cannot bear to lose is exactly what's controlling you. True domination begins the moment you realize you can lose everything and still remain unbroken. That realization doesn't make you reckless, it makes you free. And free men are the most dangerous men of all. They told you to be fair. They told you to play by the rules. They told you that good things come to those who wait. That honesty is the best policy, that if you work hard and treat people right, success will follow. They lied. The world doesn't operate on fairness. The world operates on leverage. The world doesn't reward the righteous. It rewards the strategic. The world doesn't care about your intentions. It responds to your results. Look around you. Who holds real power? Is it the fairest person you know? The most honest? The most considerate? Or is it the person who understands how the game is actually played? I've watched princes lose kingdoms because they believed in fairness. I've seen merchants lose fortunes because they trusted in goodness. I've observed leaders lose armies because they confused moral superiority with strategic superiority. Here's what most people don't understand about fairness. It's a luxury the powerful use to control the powerless. When someone tells you to be fair, ask yourself, who benefits from your fairness? When someone demands you play by the rules, ask, who wrote those rules? The strong make the rules. The weak follow them. The intelligent understand this. The naive fight it. You think your boss got promoted because he was the fairest candidate? You think that successful business owner built her empire through pure honesty? You think world leaders maintain power through kindness and consideration? Wake up. Power recognizes power. Results recognize results. Effectiveness recognizes effectiveness. The universe doesn't care about your moral position. It responds to your strategic position. But let me ask you this. What has your commitment to fairness cost you? What opportunities have you missed because you were too ethical to seize them? What victories have you lost because you were too noble to fight for them? I'm not telling you to become evil. I'm telling you to become effective. I'm not suggesting you abandon all principles. I'm suggesting you understand which principles serve you and which principles serve others at your expense. The art is knowing when to be the lion and when to be the fox. The lion uses force when force is appropriate. The fox uses cunning when cunning is required. The fool uses fairness when winning is possible. Your competitors understand this. Your rivals live by this. Your enemies count on your commitment to fairness to keep you predictable, manageable, beatable. While you're considering everyone else's feelings, they're considering their own interests. While you're making sure everything is equal, they're making sure everything is advantageous. While you're playing fair, they're playing to win. The marketplace doesn't reward fairness. It rewards value. Politics doesn't reward honesty. It rewards influence. Relationships don't reward niceness. They reward respect. You want to succeed? Stop asking if it's fair. Start asking if it's effective. Stop wondering if it's right. Start calculating if it works. Stop seeking moral approval. Start seeking strategic advantage. This doesn't make you ruthless. It makes you realistic. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. This doesn't make you evil. It makes you equal to the challenge. The world is not a fair place. It never was. It never will be. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you can start operating from reality instead of idealism. Fair is a word the losing side uses to describe their position. Fair is what weak negotiators demand when they have no leverage. Fair is what unsuccessful people call the system that doesn't reward their mediocrity. You have a choice. You can continue believing the world should be fair while watching others succeed using different rules. Or you can understand how the world actually works and position yourself accordingly. The naive believe in fairness. The wise understand advantage. The powerful create both the rules and the exceptions. Your fairness will not protect you. Your goodness will not save you. Your honesty will not elevate you. But your strategic thinking will position you. Your calculated moves will advance you. Your understanding of real power will liberate you. Stop playing the game they taught you to play. Start playing the game that actually determines the outcome. The world doesn't reward fairness, but it will reward your intelligence. The weak man chases. The strong man creates need. The master makes himself essential, then becomes scarce. True control doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't force compliance. True control makes itself necessary, quietly, systematically, irreversibly. Watch how addiction works. The first taste is free. The first experience is incredible. The first solution is perfect. Then, slowly, gradually, inevitably, they need it. They can't function without it. They can't imagine life before it. This is your template for domination. You don't control people by overpowering them. You control them by becoming indispensable to them. You don't command loyalty by demanding it. You engineer it by creating dependency. But here's what most people don't understand about dependency. It's not about giving them everything they want. It's about giving them just enough to keep them reaching, then stepping back to make that reaching feel urgent. The moment you become too available, you lose your power. The moment you give them everything they need, they stop needing you. The moment you make yourself completely accessible, you become completely dismissible. Supply and demand isn't just economics, it's psychology. Scarcity creates value. Absence creates appreciation. Distance creates desire. You want someone to value your input? Give it sparingly. You want someone to crave your attention? Withdraw it strategically. You want someone to depend on your presence? Master the art of absence. But let me ask you this. How many times have you diminished your own value by being too eager to help? How many times have you weakened your position by being too readily available? How many times have you taught people to take you for granted by never taking yourself away? The prince who solves every problem immediately teaches his subjects that problems aren't serious. The prince who responds to every request instantly teaches his court that requests aren't important. The prince who makes himself constantly accessible teaches everyone that access to him has no value. Create the need first. Become the solution they can't find anywhere else. Make yourself the answer to their most pressing problems, but do it gradually. Do it strategically. Do it in a way that makes them realize they need you more than you need them. Then disappear, not permanently, not dramatically, not with explanation or announcement. Simply become less available, less immediate, less predictable. Watch what happens. They'll reach out more frequently. They'll value your time more highly. They'll appreciate your attention more deeply. They'll respect your boundaries more completely. Your absence will teach them what your presence is worth. Your scarcity will reveal how much they depend on your abundance. Your distance will clarify how much they need your proximity. This works in business. This works in relationships. This works in leadership. This works in influence. Make yourself valuable, then make yourself rare. The drug dealer understands this. The first hit builds the relationship. The subsequent scarcity maintains the power. The user doesn't chase the dealer because the dealer is charming. They chase because the dealer controls what they need. Your expertise should work the same way. Your time should function this way. Your attention should operate by these principles. Give them a taste of what life could be like with your full involvement. Show them what's possible when you're completely engaged. Demonstrate the difference your participation makes. Then gradually, systematically, strategically become less accessible. Don't disappear because you're angry. Don't withdraw because you're hurt. Don't become scarce because you're playing games. Become scarce because scarcity increases value. Become distant because distance increases desire. Become unavailable because availability decreases appreciation. The moment they stop reaching for you, you've given them too much. The moment they stop valuing your time, you've given it too freely. The moment they stop appreciating your presence, you've made it too common. Create the dependency, then create the scarcity. Watch how quickly they reorganize their priorities around earning back your full attention. This isn't manipulation, it's education. You're teaching them to value what they have by giving them a glimpse of what it feels like to lose it. You're showing them your worth by demonstrating your absence. Make them dependent, then disappear. Return when they've learned to appreciate what they almost lost. The most dangerous predator appears harmless until the moment of attack. The most effective poison tastes sweet until it's too late. The most devastating strategy looks innocent until it's already won. Your enemies should never see you coming. Power that announces itself creates resistance. Strength that displays itself invites challenge. Ambition that reveals itself attracts opposition. But power that hides behind humility, strength that conceals itself in service, ambition that disguises itself as cooperation, this is unstoppable. The world is full of people who broadcast their intentions. They tell everyone their plans. They announce their strategies. They reveal their ambitions. They make themselves targets before they've even begun to move. Fools. The wise man keeps his weapons hidden until he needs them. The strategic mind conceals its calculations behind a smile. The powerful presence disguises its force behind politeness and consideration. Watch how the spider hunts. It doesn't chase its prey. It doesn't announce its hunger. It doesn't display its fangs. It builds a web that looks like morning dew, sits quietly in the corner, and waits for dinner to arrive. You want to dominate your environment? Learn from the spider. Build your web of influence quietly. Position yourself strategically without fanfare. Gather information without appearing curious. Develop relationships without revealing your agenda. Accumulate power without advertising your progress. But here's what most people don't understand about appearing harmless. It's not about being weak. It's about being underestimated. It's not about having no teeth. It's about keeping them hidden until you need to bite. The moment people see you as a threat, they organize against you. The moment they recognize your power, they work to limit it. The moment they understand your strategy, they develop countermeasures. But when they see you as harmless, they ignore you. When they see you as helpful, they include you. When they see you as supportive, they trust you with information they should keep secret. Your competitors will tell you their weaknesses if they think you're not competing. Your enemies will reveal their plans if they believe you're not listening. Your rivals will expose their strategies if they assume you're not capable of using that information. Appear interested in their success. Ask questions that seem curious rather than calculating. Offer help that positions you perfectly without seeming strategic. Make yourself useful in ways that give you access to everything you need to know. The executive who appears eager to please while gathering intelligence. The negotiator who seems cooperative while identifying pressure points. The leader who acts supportive while building alternative power structures. But let me ask you this. How often do you reveal your hand too early? How frequently do you announce your intentions before you're ready to act? How many times have you created unnecessary resistance by appearing threatening when you could have appeared helpful? Smart power moves in shadows. Wise strategy operates behind smiles. Effective influence disguises itself as service until it's time to collect. When you do reveal your true capability, it should be sudden, complete, undeniable. One moment they're dismissing you as irrelevant. The next moment they're realizing you've been in control the entire time. The businessman who seemed helpful until he owned their supply chain. The politician who appeared supportive until she controlled their funding. The leader who acted collaborative until he held all the critical relationships. By the time they realize what's happened, it's too late to stop it. By the time they see your true position, you're already untouchable. By the time they understand your actual power, they're already dependent on your goodwill. This requires patience. This demands discipline. This needs intelligence. Most people can't do it because they need recognition too much. They need credit too desperately. They need acknowledgement too urgently. You must learn to be comfortable with being underestimated. You must find satisfaction in being dismissed. You must take pleasure in being overlooked, because being overlooked is what allows you to move freely. The tiger that appears to be sleeping is more dangerous than the tiger that's roaring. The roaring tiger tells you exactly where it is and what it's planning. The sleeping tiger could be anywhere, planning anything, ready for everything, appear harmless. Seem helpful, look cooperative, be useful, gather intelligence, build position, accumulate advantage. Then, when the moment is perfect, when your position is secure, when your victory is certain, strike with precision that shocks them and power that devastates them. They'll never see it coming because you never let them see you. The powerful don't explain themselves. They don't justify their decisions. They don't defend their choices. They act, and they let the world draw its own conclusions. Explanation is the language of the weak. Justification is the tool of the insecure. Defense is the strategy of those who doubt their own power. When you explain yourself, you invite debate. When you justify your actions, you suggest they need justification. When you defend your decisions, you imply they might be wrong. The king doesn't explain why he made a decree. The general doesn't justify why he chose a strategy. The master doesn't defend why he took a particular action. They move with certainty, and that certainty becomes its own authority. Watch what happens when you over-explain. Your audience stops listening to your words and starts questioning your confidence. They stop focusing on your results and start examining your reasoning. They stop respecting your decision and start analyzing your doubt. Every word you use to justify your position is evidence that you're not sure of your position. Every sentence you speak to defend your choice is proof that you think your choice might be indefensible. But here's what most people don't understand about silence. It's not empty space. It's full of power. It's not absence of communication. It's the most powerful communication of all. When you don't explain, people assume you don't need to explain. When you don't justify, they assume your actions are self-evidently correct. When you don't defend, they assume your position is unassailable. Your silence forces them to fill the void with their own assumptions. And those assumptions will almost always be more favorable to you than any explanation you could have given. But let me ask you this. How many times have you weakened your position by saying too much? How often have you turned a strong decision into a questionable one by over-explaining it? How frequently have you lost respect by defending choices that needed no defense? The moment you start explaining yourself, you've already lost. The moment you begin justifying your actions, you've surrendered your authority. The moment you feel compelled to defend your decisions, you've revealed your uncertainty. Results don't need explanation. Success doesn't require justification. Victory doesn't demand defense. They speak for themselves in a language everyone understands. Your profit margins explain your business strategy better than any presentation ever could. Your relationships demonstrate your social skills more clearly than any conversation ever will. Your achievements justify your methods more powerfully than any argument ever might. When someone questions your approach, show them your results. When someone challenges your methods, point to your success. When someone demands an explanation, give them your track record. The CEO who doesn't explain how he turned the company around, he just shows the quarterly reports. The athlete who doesn't justify her training methods, she just points to her championships. The leader who doesn't defend his strategies, he just demonstrates his victories. This requires something most people don't have: complete confidence in your own judgment, complete certainty in your own decisions, complete faith in your own methods. You cannot operate from silence if you're not sure you're right. You cannot refuse to explain if you're not confident in your choices. You cannot let results speak. If you're not certain, they'll say what you want them to say. But when you are certain, when you are confident, when you are sure, your silence becomes more powerful than any words. Your refusal to explain becomes more convincing than any explanation. Your unwillingness to justify becomes more authoritative than any justification. People will interpret your silence as wisdom. They'll read your confidence as competence. They'll understand your certainty as authority. The weak man needs approval, so he explains everything, hoping for validation. The strong man needs nothing, so he explains nothing while creating admiration. Your words reveal your doubts. Your silence reveals your strength. Your explanations reveal your insecurity. Your results reveal your power. Stop explaining yourself into irrelevance. Stop justifying yourself into weakness. Stop defending yourself into defeat. Act with certainty. Move with confidence. Decide with authority. Then let the world figure out for themselves why you were right. Your results will do all the talking you'll ever need to do. Your success will provide all the explanation you'll ever need to give. Your victory will offer all the justification you'll ever need to make. Never explain. Let results speak for you. They speak louder than words ever could. Perception is reality. Image is substance. Appearance is truth. The world doesn't respond to who you are. It responds to who you appear to be. Most people spend their entire lives trying to be authentic, genuine, real. They believe that if they just show their true selves, the world will recognize their worth and reward their honesty. They die poor, unknown, and powerless. The wise understand that identity is performance. Character is theater. Reputation is careful construction. And success belongs to those who master the stage. You are not what you think you are. You are not what you feel you are. You are not even what you actually are. You are what others perceive you to be. And that perception can be managed, directed, and controlled. The king's power doesn't come from his bloodline. It comes from everyone's belief that his bloodline matters. The expert's authority doesn't come from his knowledge. It comes from everyone's assumption that he possesses knowledge. The leader's influence doesn't come from his capability. It comes from everyone's conviction that he is capable. Strip away the perception, and the power disappears. Change the image and the reality shifts. Control the appearance, and you control everything that follows. But here's what most people don't understand about appearances. They're not about deception. They're about emphasis. They're not about lying. They're about highlighting. They're not about being fake. They're about being strategic. You have many qualities. Some serve your goals. Others work against them. Some make you appear powerful. Others make you seem weak. Some create respect. Others invite disregard. The art is knowing which qualities to display and which to conceal, which aspects of yourself to emphasize and which to minimize, which traits to project and which to keep private. Your uncertainty should remain invisible while your confidence takes center stage. Your struggles should stay hidden while your successes shine brightly. Your doubt should be private while your determination becomes public. But let me ask you this. What are you inadvertently communicating about yourself? What signals are you sending that undermine your goals? What aspects of your presentation are working against your interests? The way you dress communicates your status before you speak a word. The way you carry yourself announces your confidence before you take an action. The way you respond to pressure reveals your character before you make a decision. Every interaction is a performance. Every conversation is a stage. Every meeting is theater. And you're always the lead actor in the story of your own success or failure. This doesn't mean being artificial. This means being intentional. This doesn't mean being fake. This means being strategic about which parts of your authenticity serve your purposes and which parts sabotage them. The successful entrepreneur emphasizes her victories while minimizing her failures. The respected leader highlights his decisive moments while downplaying his uncertain ones. The influential expert showcases his knowledge while concealing his ignorance. They're not lying, they're editing. They're not deceiving, they're curating. They're not being false, they're being focused. People see what you show them. People believe what you emphasize. People remember what you highlight. And people respond to what you project. Your reputation is your currency. Your image is your investment. Your appearance is your marketing. And like any currency, investment, or marketing campaign, it must be managed carefully to produce the results you want. The world is full of capable people who appear incapable, intelligent people who seem foolish, powerful people who look weak. They possess the substance, but they lack the presentation. They have the ability, but not the image. And they lose to people with less substance, but better presentation. Less ability, but superior image. Less power, but more convincing appearance. This is not about manipulation. It's about communication. This is not about trickery. It's about clarity. This is not about deceiving others. It's about helping them. See what you want them to see. You control the camera angle of your own life. You direct the lighting of your own story. You edit the footage of your own experience. And the world judges you based on what you choose to show them. Master the game of appearances. Control your image as carefully as you control your actions. Manage your reputation as strategically as you manage your resources. Because in the end, it doesn't matter what you are if no one perceives what you are. It doesn't matter what you can do if no one believes you can do it. It doesn't matter what you've accomplished if no one recognizes your accomplishments. The game of appearances isn't optional. You're playing it whether you realize it or not. The only question is whether you're playing it intentionally or accidentally. Whether you're winning it or losing it, the man who cannot control himself cannot control anything else. The woman who is slave to her emotions becomes slave to everyone who can manipulate those emotions. But the person who masters their inner world becomes master of their outer world. Emotional control is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming calculated. It's not about feeling nothing. It's about letting nothing you feel control what you do. Watch what happens in any conflict. The person who loses their temper first loses the argument. The person who becomes emotional first loses the negotiation. The person who reacts first loses the power. Your emotions are information, not instructions. They tell you what's happening inside you, but they shouldn't dictate what happens around you. They reveal your state, but they shouldn't determine your strategy. When you react emotionally, you become predictable. When you're predictable, you become controllable. And when you're controllable, you've surrendered your power to whoever can push your buttons. But here's what most people don't understand about emotional control. It's contagious. When you remain calm, others feel compelled to match your energy. When you stay composed, they struggle to maintain their chaos. When you refuse to escalate, they lose their fuel for conflict. Your emotional state sets the temperature of every room you enter. Your internal discipline creates external order. Your personal stability generates collective calm. But let me ask you this. How many times have you lost an argument you should have won because you lost your temper? How often have you weakened your position because you couldn't control your reaction? How frequently have you given others power over you by letting them trigger your emotions? The moment you become angry, you've announced your weakness. The moment you become defensive, you've revealed your insecurity. The moment you become emotional, you've shown your opponent exactly where to strike next. Your enemies want you emotional. Your competitors need you reactive. Your rivals depend on your inability to stay calm under pressure. Because when you're emotional, you make mistakes. When you're reactive, you become impulsive. When you're out of control, you become easy to defeat. The skilled manipulator doesn't attack your position. They attack your emotions. They don't challenge your logic. They trigger your feelings. They don't argue with your facts. They inflame your passions. Because they know that an emotional person is an irrational person. An irrational person makes poor decisions. A person making poor decisions loses consistently. But when you remain calm while others become agitated, something powerful happens. You appear wise while they appear foolish. You seem strong while they seem weak. You look controlled while they look chaotic. People trust calm energy. They follow composed leadership. They respect disciplined responses. They fear unpredictable reactions, but they're drawn to predictable stability. Your emotional discipline becomes your greatest weapon, not because it makes you heartless, but because it makes you strategic. Not because it eliminates your feelings, but because it prevents your feelings from eliminating your effectiveness. This doesn't mean suppressing everything you feel. This means processing what you feel privately while projecting what serves your purpose publicly. Feel angry. Use that energy to fuel your determination, not your destruction. Feel hurt? Transform that pain into motivation, not reaction. Feel frustrated? Channel that tension into action, not explosion. The master feels everything but shows only what advances their agenda. The wise person experiences every emotion but expresses only what supports their strategy. The powerful individual processes all feelings but projects only what serves their goals. When others see that you cannot be emotionally manipulated, they stop trying to manipulate you emotionally. When they realize you won't be baited into reactions, they stop setting bait. When they understand you can't be triggered, they stop pulling triggers. Your emotional control forces them to engage with your logic instead of your feelings. Your composure compels them to address your arguments instead of your reactions. Your stability requires them to match your level instead of dragging you down to theirs. This is how you control their emotions, by controlling your own so completely that your calm becomes the standard they must meet to engage with you effectively. The person who masters their emotional world doesn't just gain control over themselves, they gain influence over everyone who interacts with them. Because in a world full of reactive people, the calm person becomes the center around which everything else orbits. Control your emotions, control your reactions, control your responses, and watch how quickly you begin controlling everything else. Familiarity breeds contempt. Closeness creates entitlement. Constant availability destroys value. But distance, strategic, calculated distance, generates respect, creates mystique, and builds power. The king who eats with his servants loses his crown. The boss who becomes best friends with employees loses authority. The expert who makes himself constantly accessible loses credibility. Proximity is power's greatest enemy. When you're always there, you become part of the furniture. When you're always available, you become a convenience. When you're always accessible, you become taken for granted. But when you're selective about your presence, people value your time. When you're particular about your availability, people appreciate your attention. When you're careful about your accessibility, people respect your boundaries. Distance doesn't mean isolation. Distance means discretion. Distance means being strategic about when you're present and when you're absent, when you're engaged and when you're removed, when you're accessible and when you're unavailable. But here's what most people don't understand about distance. It's not about being cold or unfriendly. It's about being valuable. It's not about rejecting people. It's about making your acceptance meaningful. When the president speaks, people listen, not because his words are necessarily more intelligent than yours, but because he doesn't speak constantly. When the expert gives advice, people follow it, not because she's necessarily wiser than you, but because she doesn't give advice to everyone about everything. Scarcity creates value. Rarity generates respect. Selectivity builds significance. Your words carry more weight when you speak less frequently. Your opinions matter more when you don't share them constantly. Your presence feels more important when you're not always present. But let me ask you this. Have you made yourself too available? Have you become so accessible that people don't value your time? Have you been so friendly that you've lost their respect? The person who responds to every text immediately teaches others that their time isn't valuable. The professional who takes every meeting teaches colleagues that their schedule isn't important. The leader who socializes with everyone teaches followers that their attention isn't special. You must create artificial scarcity around yourself, not because you don't care about people, but because you want them to care about you. Not because you don't want to help, but because you want your help to be valued. Distance creates mystery. Mystery generates interest. Interest builds influence, and influence produces power. When people can't easily reach you, they think about you more. When they can't immediately access you, they plan their interactions with you more carefully. When they can't casually engage with you, they prepare more thoroughly when they do. Your absence makes them realize your value. Your scarcity makes them appreciate your presence. Your distance makes them desire your proximity. This works in every context. The romantic partner who's always available becomes boring. The friend who's constantly present becomes taken for granted. The colleague who's perpetually accessible becomes invisible. But the person who's selective about their time becomes intriguing. The individual who's particular about their presence becomes valuable. The professional who's strategic about their availability becomes respected. You teach people how to treat you through your boundaries. You show people your value through your scarcity. You demonstrate your worth through your selectivity. When you have no boundaries, people assume you're not worth respecting. When you have no scarcity, people assume you're not worth valuing. When you have no selectivity, people assume you're not worth pursuing. But when you maintain distance, when you create scarcity, when you exercise selectivity, people begin to see you differently. They begin to treat you differently. They begin to value you differently. This doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you strategic. This doesn't make you unfriendly. It makes you selective. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you valuable. The most powerful people in every field understand this principle. They're not constantly available. They don't respond immediately to every request. They don't make themselves accessible to everyone all the time. They use distance to create demand. They use scarcity to generate value. They use selectivity to build respect. Master the art of strategic distance. Be present when your presence matters. Be absent when your absence teaches. Be accessible when accessibility serves your goals. Be unavailable when unavailability increases your value. Distance is not rejection, it's curation. Scarcity is not cruelty, it's strategy. Selectivity is not snobbery, it's wisdom. Use distance to command respect, because in a world where everyone is always available, the person who isn't becomes irresistible. The most feared competitor is the one who wins without appearing to try. The most respected leader is the one who achieves results without visible struggle. The most powerful person is the one who makes dominance look natural, inevitable, effortless. Effort reveals strain. Struggle shows weakness. Visible difficulty suggests that what you're doing is hard for you, and if it's hard for you, others assume they could do it too, given enough effort. But when you make power look effortless, you create the impression that you operate on a different level, that you possess capabilities others lack, that what challenges everyone else comes naturally to you. This is not about actually working less. This is about concealing the work that goes into your success. This is about hiding the preparation behind the performance. This is about making the impossible look inevitable. Watch a master performer, the violinist whose fingers dance across strings without apparent effort, the athlete who makes incredible feats look routine, the speaker who delivers profound insights as if they're casual observations. They've practiced 10,000 hours to make it look like they never practiced at all. But here's what most people don't understand about effortless power. It's the result of invisible preparation. It's the product of hidden discipline. It's the outcome of secret mastery. The executive who handles every crisis with calm competence has anticipated every possible problem. The negotiator who gets everything he wants without appearing to try has prepared for every possible response. The leader who makes difficult decisions look easy has thought through every angle before the meeting begins. They make it look effortless because they've made the effort when no one was watching. But let me ask you this: how often do you advertise your struggle? How frequently do you broadcast your difficulties? How many times do you let others see how hard you're working to achieve what you've achieved? Every time you complain about how difficult something is, you diminish the impression of your capability. Every time you emphasize how much effort you're putting in, you reduce the awe others feel for your results. Every time you make your struggle visible, you make your power questionable. The weak person needs sympathy for their struggle. The strong person needs recognition only for their results. The weak person wants credit for effort. The strong person demands respect for outcome. When you make something look difficult, people think it is difficult, and they assume that anyone who works as hard as you do could achieve what you've achieved. When you make something look easy, people think you're special, and they assume they could never do what you do, no matter how hard they try. This creates a psychological distance between you and everyone else. A sense that you operate by different rules, a feeling that you possess something they lack, not just skill or knowledge, but natural superiority. Your effortlessness becomes evidence of your inherent advantage. Your ease becomes proof of your special nature. Your calm competence becomes demonstration of your fundamental difference. But this requires tremendous discipline, because when things get difficult, and they will, your instinct will be to show your struggle, to explain your challenges, to justify your difficulties, to seek understanding for your effort. Resist this instinct, the master suffers in private and succeeds in public. The powerful struggle behind closed doors and emerge victorious in full view. The wise prepare in darkness and perform in light. Your preparation should be invisible. Your practice should be private. Your effort should be secret. What people see should only be the polished performance, the finished product, the final result. When someone asks how you did something remarkable, your answer should be simple, brief, almost dismissive, not because you don't value what you've done, but because you don't want to demystify it, not because the work wasn't significant, but because making the work visible makes the result less impressive. The magician doesn't explain the trick because explanation destroys the magic. The artist doesn't detail the technique because process undermines awe. The powerful don't reveal their methods because mystery maintains respect. This doesn't mean being dishonest about your success. This means being strategic about what you emphasize. Emphasize results, not process. Highlight outcomes, not methods. Showcase achievements, not effort. People want to believe in natural superiority. They want to think that some individuals are simply born different, gifted, special. When you make your power look effortless, you feed this fantasy and position yourself as one of the chosen few. When power looks difficult, it invites challenge. When power looks effortless, it inspires submission. When someone thinks they could do what you do if they just worked harder, they start working harder to compete with you. When they think what you do is beyond their capability, they stop competing and start following. Make your victories look inevitable. Make your success appear natural. Make your dominance seem effortless. Not because it is, but because that's how dominance should appear to maintain its power. The most feared opponent is not the one who struggles visibly and wins anyway. It's the one who seems incapable of losing because winning comes so naturally. To them, the mouth reveals, the eyes discover, the tongue exposes your thoughts, the ears collect your advantage. In any room, the most dangerous person is not the one talking the most. It's the one listening the most. Information is power. Intelligence is leverage. Knowledge is control. And all of these come to those who observe more than they speak. When you talk, you give away your position. When you listen, you learn everyone else's position. When you speak, you reveal your knowledge. When you observe, you gather knowledge. When you share your thoughts, you make yourself predictable. When you collect their thoughts, you make them manageable. The chattering person tells you everything you need to know about them. Their fears, their desires, their weaknesses, their strategies, they cannot help themselves. The need to speak, to be heard, to be understood, overwhelms their strategic thinking. But the quiet observer, they know everyone's business while revealing nothing of their own. They understand every dynamic while exposing none of their leverage. They see every opportunity while announcing none of their intentions. Silence makes you mysterious. Mystery makes you powerful. Power makes you dangerous. But here's what most people don't understand about observation. It's not passive. It's not sitting quietly in the corner being ignored. True observation is active intelligence gathering, strategic information collection, deliberate advantage accumulation. You're studying how people react under pressure. You're noting who allies, with whom when conflicts arise. You're identifying who holds real influence versus who just makes noise. You're mapping the power structures that aren't obvious to casual participants. But let me ask you this. How much valuable information have you missed because you were too busy talking? How many advantages have you lost because you needed to Share your opinion? How many opportunities have you overlooked because you were focused on being heard rather than hearing? The person who talks first in a negotiation reveals their eagerness. The person who speaks most in a meeting shows their desperation for recognition. The person who shares most in a conversation exposes their need for validation. But the person who listens gathers intelligence. The person who observes collects leverage. The person who watches discovers opportunities. Your words are finite resources. Spend them carefully. Your opinions are valuable currency. Don't give them away freely. Your thoughts are competitive advantages. Don't distribute them carelessly. When others talk, they tell you what they want you to know. When they think you're not paying attention, they reveal what they don't want you to know. When they believe you're not listening, they expose what they're trying to hide. The casual conversation that reveals their financial pressures. The offhand comment that exposes their relationship problems. The throwaway remark that betrays their strategic concerns. You collect all of this because you're listening while they're talking. You gather all of this because you're observing while they're performing. You learn all of this because you're watching while they're showing off. This intelligence becomes your advantage, not because you use it maliciously, but because understanding people's motivations, pressures, and desires allows you to position yourself strategically, to offer solutions they need, to avoid problems they're creating, to align with their interests when beneficial, and distance yourself when necessary. The quiet person in the meeting who speaks only once, but when they do, they demonstrate they've understood everything discussed better than anyone else. The silent observer who asks one question, but it's the question that reveals they've seen through to the core issue everyone else missed. When you do speak, your words carry weight because they're rare. Your opinions matter because they're carefully considered. Your observations hit hard because they're precisely targeted. People begin to wait for your input. They start watching for your reactions. They begin seeking your approval because you don't give it easily. Your silence becomes more powerful than their words. Your observation becomes more valuable than their chatter. Your rare contributions become more significant than their constant commentary. In a world full of people desperate to be heard, the person who listens becomes indispensable. In a conversation full of voices competing for attention, the mind that observes everything becomes the most important presence in the room. Observe more than you speak. Listen more than you share. Watch more than you perform. Collect more than you reveal, because the person who knows everyone's secrets while keeping their own holds all the cards in any game being played. Everyone has weaknesses. Everyone has fears. Everyone has needs they're desperate to fulfill, and insecurities they're desperate to hide. The question is not whether these vulnerabilities exist. The question is whether you're intelligent enough to identify them and strategic enough to use them. People will tell you their weaknesses if you know how to listen. They'll reveal their fears if you know how to watch. They'll expose their needs if you know how to observe. The executive who constantly mentions his expensive car is insecure about his status. The colleague who always talks about her busy schedule is afraid of appearing unimportant. The friend who repeatedly emphasizes his happiness is desperately trying to convince himself of something he doesn't feel. Every boast reveals an insecurity. Every defensiveness exposes a vulnerability. Every overreaction points to a pressure point. Your job is to collect this information, catalog it, remember it, and use it when the moment requires leverage. But here's what most people don't understand about using weaknesses. It's not about cruelty. It's not about destroying people. It's not about causing unnecessary pain. It's about understanding what motivates people so you can position yourself advantageously in every interaction. When you understand someone's deepest fear, you know exactly what they'll do anything to avoid. When you identify their greatest need, you know exactly what they'll sacrifice to obtain. When you recognize their primary insecurity, you know exactly what they'll pay to protect. This knowledge becomes your leverage. But let me ask you this: how often do you miss these signals because you're too focused on presenting yourself instead of studying others. How frequently do you fail to gather this intelligence because you're too busy talking instead of listening? How many times do you overlook these advantages because you're not paying attention to what people are really telling you? The person who desperately needs approval will do almost anything for recognition. The individual who fears being seen as incompetent will work overtime to prove their value. The colleague who's insecure about their position will go to great lengths to appear indispensable. Once you understand these motivations, you can provide exactly what they need in exchange for exactly what you want. You offer the recognition they crave in return for the support you require. You provide the validation they seek in exchange for the cooperation you need. You give them the security they desire in return for the compliance you want. This isn't manipulation, it's motivation. You're not exploiting their weaknesses, you're addressing their needs. You're not taking advantage of their vulnerabilities. You're offering solutions to their problems. The key is knowing what each person values most and what they fear losing. The status-conscious person will do anything to maintain their image. The security-focused individual will sacrifice almost everything to avoid risk. The approval-seeking personality will compromise their principles to be liked. You don't attack these weaknesses. You work with them. You don't exploit these fears. You help them avoid what they're afraid of. You don't abuse these needs. You find ways to fulfill them that also serve your interests. The negotiation where you understand their financial pressures while they don't understand yours. The business relationship where you know their deadlines while they're unaware of your timeline. The personal interaction where you recognize their emotional needs while they can't identify yours. In each case, your knowledge gives you control over the dynamic, not because you use that knowledge maliciously, but because understanding their motivations allows you to structure interactions that serve both of your interests, with the balance tilted slightly in your favor. This requires emotional intelligence. This demands careful observation. This needs strategic thinking. Most people are too self-absorbed to gather this information, too unfocused to remember it, too undisciplined to use it effectively. But when you master this skill, every interaction becomes an opportunity to gain advantage. Every conversation becomes a chance to collect intelligence. Every relationship becomes a source of leverage. People will give you their weaknesses freely if you create the right environment. They'll expose their vulnerabilities willingly if you show genuine interest. They'll reveal their fears openly if you demonstrate understanding and acceptance. And once you have this information, you have influence, not the crude influence of threats and demands, but the sophisticated influence of understanding and positioning. Turn their weaknesses into your leverage, not by attacking their vulnerabilities, but by understanding their needs and positioning yourself as the person who can meet those needs when it serves your interests to do so. The loudest elimination is the least effective elimination. The most dramatic removal creates the most resistance. The most obvious attack generates the most sympathy for your target and the most enemies for yourself. But quiet elimination, silent removal, invisible neutralization, this leaves no martyrs, creates no heroes, generates no backlash. When you destroy someone publicly, you make them famous. When you attack someone dramatically, you make them sympathetic. When you eliminate someone obviously, you make them legendary. But when threats simply fade away, when problems gradually disappear, when obstacles quietly dissolve, no one notices except you, and no one mourns what they didn't see coming. The art of elimination is the art of making it look like anything except elimination. They didn't get fired. They found a better opportunity elsewhere. They weren't forced out. They decided to pursue other interests. They weren't eliminated. They simply became irrelevant. But here's what most people don't understand about quiet elimination. It's not about destroying people. It's about removing obstacles. It's not about causing harm. It's about preventing harm to yourself. It's not about cruelty. It's about efficiency. The colleague who undermines you in meetings doesn't need to be attacked publicly. They need to lose access to information that makes their undermining possible. The competitor who threatens your position doesn't need to be confronted dramatically. They need to find their advantages systematically removed. But let me ask you this. How many times have you created unnecessary enemies by making your moves too obvious? How often have you generated sympathy for your opponents by being too aggressive in your actions? How frequently have you failed to eliminate threats because you wanted credit for eliminating them? The moment you announce your intention to remove someone, they begin preparing their defense. The moment you attack someone openly, they start gathering allies. The moment you make your hostility visible, they begin working to make your hostility costly. But when elimination happens quietly, gradually, invisibly, there's no defense to prepare, no allies to gather, no costs to impose. By the time they realize what's happening, it's already over. You don't cut off their head in the town square. You slowly, systematically, strategically remove their ability to threaten you. You don't destroy their reputation. You make their reputation irrelevant. You don't defeat them. You make them defeat themselves. The project leader who loses access to key resources until their project fails naturally. The rival who finds their supporters gradually redirected to other priorities. The threat who discovers their platform slowly but consistently undermined until they have no foundation from which to operate. In each case, what appears to be failure looks like their failure, not your action. What seems to be defeat appears to be their incompetence, not your strategy. What looks like elimination seems to be natural consequences, not deliberate intervention. This requires patience. This demands subtlety. This needs intelligence. Most people want immediate satisfaction, dramatic results, obvious victory. They want everyone to know they won and everyone to know their opponent lost. This is ego, not strategy. Strategic elimination is invisible. Effective removal is subtle. Powerful neutralization looks like natural selection. You systematically remove their advantages without appearing to take any action. You gradually eliminate their support without seeming to interfere. You slowly neutralize their capability without obviously opposing them. The key is making it look like everything that happens to them is either their own fault or simple bad luck. Never your intervention, never your strategy, never your action. Their funding gets redirected to other priorities, budget constraints, not your influence. Their allies become unavailable, scheduling conflicts, not your persuasion. Their opportunities disappear, market changes, not your interference. When someone ceases to be a threat, it should look like they stopped being a threat naturally, not because you made them stop being a threat artificially. This protects you from retaliation. This shields you from blame. This prevents you from creating new enemies while you're eliminating current ones. The most successful elimination is the one where even the target doesn't realize they've been eliminated until long after it's irreversible, where they attribute their decline to forces beyond anyone's control rather than strategy under your control. Eliminate threats quietly. Remove obstacles silently. Neutralize opposition invisibly, because the elimination no one sees coming is the elimination no one can prevent, resist, or avenge. Fear inspires respect. Hatred inspires rebellion. Fear creates submission. Hatred creates resistance. Fear generates compliance. Hatred generates conspiracy. The art is being feared enough that people think twice before opposing you, but not hated enough that they unite against you. When people fear you, they calculate the cost of crossing you and usually decide it's not worth the risk. When people hate you, they calculate the satisfaction of destroying you and often decide it's worth any cost. Fear is functional. Hatred is dangerous. Fear controls behavior. Hatred motivates revenge. You want people to fear disappointing you, not fear being around you. You want them to fear the consequences of opposing you, not fear the experience of knowing you. You want them to fear crossing you, not fear existing in your presence. But here's what most people don't understand about fear. It's not about intimidation. It's not about threats. It's not about being cruel or harsh or aggressive. True fear comes from competence, not cruelty, from capability, not callousness, from power, not posturing. When people know you can destroy them but choose not to, they fear your restraint more than they would fear your action. When they understand you have the power to eliminate them but use that power judiciously, they respect your discipline while fearing your capability. But when you use that power carelessly, cruelly, unnecessarily, fear turns to hatred. Respect turns to resentment. Submission turns to planning for rebellion. But let me ask you this. Have you confused being feared with being disliked? Have you mistaken intimidation for influence? Have you assumed that making people uncomfortable makes you powerful? The boss everyone hates is not powerful. He's vulnerable. The leader everyone fears to approach is not respected. He's isolated. The person everyone avoids is not dominant. He's destined for sabotage. True power creates fear through demonstration of capability, not through display of cruelty. Through proof of competence, not proof of callousness. Through evidence of strength, not evidence of sadism. People should fear your standards, not your temper. They should fear your expectations, not your personality. They should fear your judgment, not your character. When your standards are high and consistently enforced, people fear failing to meet them. When your expectations are clear and non-negotiable, people fear disappointing them. When your judgment is respected and final, people fear receiving negative evaluation. This kind of fear is productive. It motivates excellence. It encourages effort. It inspires improvement. But fear of your mood, fear of your reactions, fear of your unpredictability, this is counterproductive. It motivates avoidance. It encourages deception. It inspires plots against you. The difference is simple. Productive fear comes from respect for your power. Destructive fear comes from hatred of your personality. When people fear what you can do, they work to stay on your good side. When people hate who you are, they work to remove you from any side. You achieve this balance through strategic restraint, through visible competence, through demonstrated capability combined with judicious application. They see that you could destroy the person who betrayed you, but you choose a measured response that solves the problem without creating new enemies. They observe that you have the power to humiliate the person who challenged you, but you demonstrate strength through control rather than cruelty. Your restraint becomes more frightening than your action because it suggests depth of power you're not fully displaying. Your measured responses become more intimidating than explosive reactions because they suggest strategic thinking behind your strength. People fear the iceberg more than the wave. The wave announces all its power in the moment of impact. The iceberg reveals only a fraction of its mass, leaving the rest to imagination. Be the iceberg. Show enough power to command respect. Demonstrate enough capability to discourage opposition. Display enough strength to prevent challenges, but always leave them wondering how much more you possess that you're not showing. Always leave them calculating what you could do, not just what you have done. Always leave them respecting your restraint while fearing your potential. This creates the perfect balance. They fear your power enough to avoid testing it, but they don't hate your character enough to risk everything to eliminate you. Be feared without being hated. Command respect without creating enemies. Inspire caution without generating rebellion, because fear without hatred is control. But hatred, even with fear, is eventually revolution. Every room has an energy. Every interaction has a tone. Every relationship has a dynamic. The question is not whether these will be established. The question is whether you will establish them or someone else will. When you walk into a room, you either raise the energy or lower it. You either set the standard for excellence or accept the standard that already exists. You either define how people should behave or you adapt to how people are behaving. Leaders set the tone. Followers accept the tone. Dominators create the standard. Subordinates meet the standard someone else created. You have approximately 30 seconds when you enter any environment to establish your position in the hierarchy. 30 seconds to communicate your expectations. 30 seconds to set the standard by which everything that follows will be measured. Miss this window and you spend the rest of the interaction working within someone else's framework, playing by someone else's rules, measured against someone else's standards. But here's what most people don't understand about setting standards. It's not about announcing your expectations. It's about embodying them. It's not about telling people how they should behave. It's about showing them through your own behavior what excellence looks like. Your standards become contagious. Your energy becomes the baseline. Your behavior becomes the template. Everyone else either matches or falls short of. But let me ask you this. How often do you enter situations and immediately begin adapting to the energy that already exists? How frequently do you lower your standards to match the environment instead of raising the environment to match your standards? How many times do you accept mediocrity? Because everyone else has accepted mediocrity. When you accept someone else's standard, you've already lost. When you adapt to their energy, you've surrendered your power. When you play by their rules, you've given them control over the outcome. The executive who walks into a chaotic meeting and immediately brings order through his presence. The professional who enters a casual environment and elevates the conversation through her focus. The leader who joins a disorganized team and creates structure through his clarity. They don't announce what the standard should be. They embody what the standard is. They don't explain how people should behave. They demonstrate how people will behave in their presence. This happens through your posture, your voice, your attention, your questions, your responses. Every element of your presentation communicates your expectations and establishes your standards. When you carry yourself with precision, others begin to focus. When you speak with clarity, others begin to listen. When you ask intelligent questions, others begin thinking more carefully. When you respond thoughtfully, others begin considering their words more seriously. Your standard becomes their standard, not because you imposed it, but because you made it attractive. Not because you demanded it, but because you modeled it. Not because you forced compliance, but because you inspired elevation. But this requires absolute consistency. You cannot set high standards sometimes and accept low standards other times. You cannot demand excellence on Monday and tolerate mediocrity on Tuesday. You cannot be focused in meetings and scattered in conversations. Your standards must be visible in everything you do. Your expectations must be clear in every interaction. Your level of excellence must be evident in every engagement. When people know that being around you means operating at a higher level, they either rise to meet that level or remove themselves from your presence. When they understand that your standards are non-negotiable, they either meet those standards or admit they're not capable of working with you. This creates natural selection in your relationships. The excellent people gravitate toward you because they appreciate operating at a high level. The mediocre people distance themselves because they're uncomfortable with your expectations. You end up surrounded by excellence because you've made excellence the price of access to you. This works in every context. The friend who always has meaningful conversations elevates every social interaction. The colleague who consistently delivers exceptional work raises the standard for the entire team. The partner who maintains high personal standards inspires everyone around them to improve. Set the standard through your presence. Define the tone through your energy. Establish the expectation through your example. Because in every situation, someone will determine what's acceptable. Someone will establish what's expected. Someone will define what's possible. That someone should be you. Set the standard or be set by it. Define the tone or be defined by it. Control the environment or be controlled by it. The choice is always yours, but only if you make it quickly, clearly, and consistently. Behavior that gets rewarded gets repeated. Behavior that gets ignored gets extinguished. Behavior that gets punished gets avoided. Your responses train people how to treat you more effectively than any conversation ever could. When you reward everything, you value nothing. When you praise constantly, your praise becomes meaningless. When you give positive feedback freely, positive feedback loses its power to motivate. But when you reward sparingly, each reward carries tremendous weight. When you praise selectively, your praise becomes precious. When you give positive feedback strategically, people work harder to earn it. Scarcity creates value. Rarity generates significance. Selectivity builds meaning. Your approval should be earned, not given. Your recognition should be deserved, not distributed. Your positive attention should be achieved, not assumed. But here's what most people don't understand about punishment. It's not about revenge. It's not about cruelty. It's not about making people suffer. It's about creating clear consequences that prevent future problems and establish boundaries that protect your position. When someone violates your standards, disrespects your time, or challenges your authority, your response teaches everyone watching how seriously you take your boundaries. Your reaction in that moment determines whether similar violations will happen again. But let me ask you this. Have you taught people to take you for granted by rewarding mediocre behavior? Have you encouraged disrespect by failing to punish? Disrespectful actions? Have you created problems by being too generous with approval and too lenient with violations? The parent who praises their child for every small action raises a child who expects praise for breathing. The boss who celebrates every minor achievement leads a team that stops striving for major accomplishments. The leader who rewards everyone equally motivates no one exceptionally. But the parent whose approval means something because it's reserved for genuine achievement. The boss whose recognition carries weight because it's earned through excellence. The leader whose positive attention feels significant because it's rare and meaningful. When punishment comes, it must be swift, clear, and proportional, not cruel, but certain, not excessive, but effective, not emotional, but decisive. The employee who consistently misses deadlines doesn't need a lecture. They need consequences that make missing deadlines more costly than meeting them. The person who disrespects your time doesn't need explanation. They need to lose access to your time. Until they demonstrate they value it, people are constantly testing your boundaries. They're checking to see if your standards are real or just suggestions. They're discovering whether your expectations have consequences or are merely hopes. Every test is a teaching moment. Every violation is an opportunity to clarify your position. Every challenge is a chance to demonstrate whether your power is real or imaginary. When someone crosses a line and nothing happens, you've moved the line. When someone violates a standard and faces no consequences, you've lowered the standard. When someone disrespects a boundary and experiences no cost, you've eliminated the boundary. But when someone tests you and immediately encounters clear, proportional consequences, they learn. And everyone watching learns. And future tests become less likely because the cost has been established. Your responses create your reputation, your reactions build your boundaries, your consequences construct your credibility. The key is consistency. You cannot ignore violations sometimes and punish them other times. You cannot reward mediocrity on Tuesday and demand excellence on Wednesday. You cannot be lenient in the morning and strict in the afternoon. People need to know exactly what to expect from you. They need to understand precisely what earns rewards and what triggers consequences. They need to predict accurately how you'll respond to different behaviors. This predictability doesn't make you weak. It makes you reliable. It doesn't make you boring. It makes you trustworthy. It doesn't make you rigid. It makes you clear. When people know that excellence will be recognized and violations will have consequences, they choose their actions more carefully. When they understand that your approval is valuable because it's rare, they work harder to earn it. When they realize that crossing your boundaries is costly, they respect those boundaries. Reward sparingly, so your rewards matter. Punish decisively, so your boundaries hold. Be consistent so your standards stick. Because the behavior you tolerate becomes the behavior you encourage. The standards you enforce become the standards people meet. The consequences you implement become the respect you command. Train people to treat you well by responding strategically to how they treat you now. Weakness is everywhere. It's in the colleague who needs constant validation, the friend who can't make decisions alone, the leader who apologizes for having standards, the competitor who explains away every failure. Study them, learn from them, understand them. Not to mock them, but to avoid becoming them. Every weak behavior you observe is a lesson in what not to do. Every ineffective habit you witness is instruction in what not to develop. Every failed strategy you see is education in what not to attempt. The weak reveal their weakness through patterns. They make the same mistakes repeatedly. They fall into the same traps consistently. They create the same problems predictably. Watch how the weak negotiate. They reveal their desperation immediately. They accept the first offer that doesn't insult them. They compromise before they're asked to compromise. They give concessions hoping to receive kindness in return. Learn from this. Understand that desperation kills deals. Eagerness destroys leverage. Need eliminates negotiating power. But here's what most people don't understand about studying weakness. It's not about judgment. It's about prevention. It's not about superiority. It's about strategy. It's not about feeling better than others. It's about becoming better than you currently are. The weak person who over-explains teaches you the power of saying less. The insecure individual who seeks constant approval shows you the strength of self-validation. The unsuccessful person who makes excuses demonstrates the importance of taking responsibility. But let me ask you this. Which weak behaviors are you unconsciously repeating? Which ineffective patterns have you adopted without realizing? Which unsuccessful strategies are you using because you haven't studied what doesn't work? Watch how weak people handle rejection. They take it personally. They argue with the decision. They try to convince people to change their minds. They make rejection about their worth rather than simply about circumstances or preferences. Learn from this weakness. Understand that rejection is information, not judgment. That no is data, not criticism. That setbacks are events, not identities. Study how weak people respond to success. They apologize for winning. They downplay their achievements. They attribute their results to luck rather than skill. They make themselves smaller to make others comfortable. Learn from this weakness. Understand that success should be owned, not apologized for. That achievements should be acknowledged, not minimized. That capability should be demonstrated, not hidden. Observe how weak people handle conflict. They avoid it until it becomes unavoidable. They compromise their position before the negotiation begins. They prioritize being liked over being respected. They choose temporary peace over permanent resolution. Learn from this weakness. Understand that conflict avoided doesn't disappear. It accumulates. That premature compromise isn't kindness. It's cowardice. That being liked and being respected are different goals requiring different strategies. Watch how weak people make decisions. They gather endless information without ever deciding. They seek approval from everyone before committing to anything. They change their minds when challenged. They second-guess themselves after choosing. Learn from this weakness. Understand that perfect information doesn't exist. That universal approval isn't achievable. That changing direction at the first challenge reveals lack of conviction rather than wisdom. Study how weak people present themselves. They apologize for taking up space. They minimize their accomplishments in conversation. They seek permission for things that don't require permission. They ask questions when they should make statements. Learn from this weakness. Understand that your presence has value, that your achievements deserve acknowledgement, that seeking unnecessary permission diminishes authority, that questions can reveal uncertainty while statements demonstrate confidence. Observe how weak people handle power when they occasionally receive it. They use it to be liked rather than to be effective. They apologize for having it rather than exercising it. They share it unnecessarily rather than concentrating it strategically. They give it away rather than leveraging it. Learn from this weakness. Understand that power unused is power wasted, that apologizing for authority undermines authority, that sharing power indiscriminately dilutes power, that giving power away freely teaches others not to respect your power, the weak person's patterns. Become your playbook for what to avoid. Their mistakes become your roadmap for what not to repeat. Their failures become your instruction manual for what not to attempt. But the most important lesson from studying weakness is recognizing it in yourself, identifying the moments when you slip into weak patterns, catching yourself before you adopt ineffective strategies, stopping yourself before you repeat unsuccessful behaviors. The executive who notices himself over-explaining and stops mid-sentence. The negotiator who catches herself revealing desperation and changes tactics. The leader who realizes he's seeking approval instead of commanding respect and adjusts his approach. Self-awareness prevents self-sabotage. Recognition enables correction. Understanding your own weak tendencies allows you to strengthen them before they weaken you. Every day you see weakness in action. In meetings where people apologize for having opinions, in negotiations where desperation destroys leverage, in conversations where insecurity creates ineffectiveness, in decisions where fear produces paralysis. Take notes, remember patterns, study behaviors, learn lessons, but most importantly, apply those lessons to your own behavior. Use other people's weaknesses as mirrors to examine your own. Let their failures teach you what to strengthen within yourself. The person who studies weakness, while remaining blind to their own weak patterns, learns nothing useful. The individual who recognizes weakness in others while repeating it themselves gains no advantage. But the strategist who studies weakness to eliminate it, who observes failure to prevent it, who watches ineffectiveness to avoid it, becomes stronger through other people's lessons without having to experience other people's consequences. Study weak men to become a strong one. Learn from their patterns to break your own. Understand their failures to prevent yours. Because in a world full of people making the same mistakes repeatedly, the person who learns from those mistakes without making them holds an enormous advantage. Strategy without execution is philosophy. Execution without strategy is chaos. But strategy combined with the willingness to execute decisively, this is dominance. Most people can plan. Many people can think strategically. Some people can see several moves ahead. But few people can do what needs to be done when the moment demands action that others consider too harsh, too direct, too final. The gap between knowing what should be done and actually doing it is where most people lose. The distance between understanding the strategy and executing it completely is where power is won or lost. You can have the perfect plan, the ideal strategy, the flawless analysis, but if you cannot execute when execution requires difficult decisions, your intelligence becomes irrelevant. But here's what most people don't understand about ruthlessness. It's not about cruelty. It's not about enjoying the pain of others. It's not about being unnecessarily harsh or deliberately destructive. True ruthlessness is about doing what's necessary regardless of how it makes you feel. It's about making decisions based on effectiveness rather than emotion. It's about choosing results over relationships when the situation demands it. When your business partner is sabotaging the company, strategy tells you they must be removed. Ruthlessness gives you the ability to remove them even though you've been friends for years. When your employee's poor performance is dragging down the entire team, strategy identifies the problem. Ruthlessness provides the strength to solve it, even though you know they have a family to support. When your competitor is using unethical tactics to destroy your market position, strategy reveals what needs to be done. Ruthlessness supplies the resolve to do it even though it will end their career. But let me ask you this. How many times has your inability to execute difficult decisions cost you victory? How often has your reluctance to do what's necessary allowed problems to grow? How frequently has your emotional hesitation turned winning strategies into losing realities? The moment you hesitate to do what your strategy requires, you've chosen defeat. The moment you let emotions override your execution, you've surrendered to circumstances. The moment you refuse to pay the price your plan demands, you've decided to accept lesser results. Strategic thinking identifies what needs to happen. Ruthless execution makes it happen. Without both, you have neither effectiveness nor results. This doesn't mean being impulsive. This doesn't mean being unnecessarily aggressive. This doesn't mean acting without thought or planning without consideration. True, strategic ruthlessness is calculated, deliberate, precise. You've thought through the consequences, you've considered the alternatives, you've weighed the costs, and you've decided that achieving your goal is worth paying the price required. The general who sends soldiers into battle knows some will die, but executes the plan because victory serves the greater good. The surgeon who cuts into healthy tissue to remove cancer knows it will cause pain, but proceeds because healing requires temporary damage. The leader who fires a popular but incompetent manager knows it will create temporary upset, but acts because long-term success demands short-term difficulty. In each case, strategy without ruthless execution would mean failure. Caring without courage would mean defeat. Planning without the will to implement would mean irrelevance. But ruthlessness without strategy is equally destructive. Acting harshly without thinking clearly creates unnecessary enemies. Making difficult decisions without proper analysis wastes resources. Being tough without being smart amplifies problems rather than solving them. The balance is knowing when to be calculating and when to be decisive, when to think and when to act, when to plan and when to execute, when to consider consequences, and when to accept them. You must be both the architect and the demolition crew, the designer and the builder, the strategist and the executor. You must be able to see what needs to be done and willing to do what you see. This requires emotional discipline, moral clarity about your priorities, intellectual honesty about what success actually costs, and the strength to pay that cost when the moment arrives. Most people can think strategically until the strategy requires sacrifice. Most people can plan ruthlessly until the plan requires action. Most people can be decisive until the decision has consequences they don't want to accept. But the truly powerful can think and act, plan and execute, strategize and implement. They understand that good intentions without effective action change nothing. That perfect plans without decisive execution accomplish nothing. That strategic thinking without ruthless implementation means nothing. You must be both strategic and ruthless. Smart enough to know what needs to be done, strong enough to do it. Wise enough to plan correctly, tough enough to execute completely. Because in the end, the world rewards results, not intentions. Outcomes, not plans. Achievement, not analysis. And achievement requires both the intelligence to know what to do and the strength to do what you know. True transformation happens in isolation. Real rebuilding requires removal from the world that knew your previous version. Genuine reinvention demands disappearance from those who cannot imagine you as anything other than what you were. The caterpillar doesn't become a butterfly while remaining visible to the world. It disappears completely, dissolves entirely, rebuilds fundamentally, and emerges as something no one recognizes. This is your template for ultimate dominance. When you've learned these principles, when you've absorbed these strategies, when you're ready to implement total transformation, you must vanish from your current position and rebuild yourself beyond their recognition. But here's what most people don't understand about disappearance. It's not about running away from problems. It's not about escaping responsibility. It's not about avoiding challenges. It's about removing yourself from the limitations others have placed on your identity. The people who know you now know you as you were, not as you're becoming. They see you through the lens of your past behavior, not your future potential. They interact with you based on their previous experience, not your current capability. And this knowledge limits you, their expectations constrain you. Their assumptions about who you are prevent them from seeing who you're becoming. But let me ask you this. How many times have you tried to change while remaining in the same environment? How often have you attempted transformation while surrounded by people who couldn't see your evolution? How frequently have you worked to rebuild yourself while staying in situations that kept you exactly as you were? Real change requires real distance. Genuine transformation demands genuine separation. True rebuilding needs true removal from everything that reinforced your previous version. You cannot become a new person while living the old person's life. You cannot develop new capabilities while surrounded by people who only know your old limitations. You cannot build new patterns while trapped in environments that trigger your old behaviors. The executive who disappears from corporate life to build something entirely new. The artist who vanishes from their scene to develop a completely different style. The leader who steps away from their position to rebuild their approach fundamentally. They understand that transformation visible to others is transformation limited by others. That change observed by your previous world is change constrained by your previous identity. During your disappearance, you rebuild everything. Your habits, your standards, your relationships, your goals, your methods, your identity. You don't improve the old version, you create a new version. You don't fix what was broken, you build what never existed. This rebuilding happens in silence, in secrecy, in solitude. Away from the opinions, expectations, and limitations of those who knew who you used to be. You study, you practice, you experiment, you fail, you learn, you rebuild, you strengthen, you prepare, all while invisible to the world that would try to keep you as you were. When you return, and you will return, you return as someone they've never met, someone they don't recognize, someone they can't predict or control or limit based on who you used to be. The transformation is so complete that they can't connect your new version to your old identity. The change is so fundamental that they can't use their previous experience with you to understand their current experience with you. This return isn't gradual, it isn't progressive, it isn't evolutionary, it's sudden, complete, revolutionary. One day you're absent, the next day you're present, but as someone entirely different. The disappeared person who returns with new skills they never displayed, new confidence they never possessed, new standards they never maintained, new power they never wielded. They try to interact with you based on old patterns, but the old patterns don't work. They attempt to manipulate you using old knowledge, but that knowledge is obsolete. They expect old responses, but receive completely different reactions. This discontinuity is disorienting, disturbing, powerful, because they can no longer predict you, they can no longer control you. Because they can't understand your transformation, they can't resist your new position. Your disappearance breaks their psychological connection to your previous self. Your rebuilding creates capabilities they never witnessed. Your return introduces someone they've never encountered, and this person, this new version of you, operates by different rules, maintains different standards, possesses different capabilities, commands different respect. The ultimate dominance isn't about defeating the old competition. It's about becoming competition they've never faced. It's not about winning the old game better. It's about returning with a new game they don't know how to play. Disappear completely. Rebuild fundamentally. Return unrecognizably. Because the most powerful person in any room is the one no one saw. Coming, no one can predict, and no one knows how to handle. You already have what it takes. Now go prove it.